to the cloud. Thank you for the reminder.
Perfect. Yep, no worries. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Caroline Charles, the Community Relations Coordinator with the Planning Commission. Thank you all for attending the virtual stakeholder meeting this evening. We're going to be going over the City of Tampa's proposed plan amendment to TA CPA 2111, which proposes removing the ability to utilize floor area ratio for single-use residential development in the community mixed-use 35, community commercial 35, and urban mixed-use 60 future land use categories. We strongly encourage you guys to participate and submit any questions and comments throughout the meeting. Questions and comments can be submitted anytime by typing them into the chat box, or if you would like to make a public comment after the presentation, you can click on the raise hand button to be recognized. If you're on a desktop, just click on reactions at the bottom of the screen and then select the raise hand button that appears in the menu. And for those of you on a mobile device, click on more at the bottom of the app and then select the raise hand button from there. And if at any time you're having difficulty, just message us in the chat and we'll make sure your comments are heard. I'll now turn it over to David Hay. David is an executive planner and the City of Tampa liaison with the Hillsborough County Planning Commission. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Caroline. Good evening, everybody. Again, David Hay, Planning Commission staff. I think I've met you all before, so I'm lead up the Tampa team for the Planning Commission. Tonight, this is the second stakeholder meeting. So regarding this amendment, the first one was very helpful for the staff, for the Planning Commission staff, for the city staff. So we wanted to have another one to keep everyone in the loop on the proposed changes that the city is requesting through this amendment. So I just have a quick PowerPoint, and let's make sure the chat is on so I could see that as well. Hopefully you could see all my screen, correct? Yep, okay, good. That's the first success right there. All right, so again, we had our first stakeholder meeting May 25th. Now we're in this, we had to add a phase 1B so we could have the second stakeholder meeting on August 3rd. This does go to the Planning Commission, a briefing where there's that is in front of the Planning Commission. There is no staff recommendation at that briefing. It's just to let the commissioners know what the amendment is proposing and to be ready to for them to ask any questions of staff, so then we can get back to them when it goes back with a consistency finding on September 14th. Right now, the transmittal hearing is scheduled with Tampa City Council for September 30th, so we're on track. And we're still waiting to determine when the adoption hearing will be. But once that is set, we will, of course, let you all know ASAP. A little background, again, this is it is publicly initiated by Tampa City Council. This FAR option was adopted into the comprehensive plan in 1998. The original intent stated within the comp plan was the concept permitted residential uses to be competitive with commercial and or office uses. That's a quote right out of that 1998 plan. We all have to remember commercial functioned a little differently back in the 90s than it does now. This was all pre-Amazon and pre-Walmart delivery and all that stuff. So retail and residential and commercial just function differently in the 90s than now. So as amended, the proposed language would only apply in the South and New Tampa planning districts. So the restriction on the option to use floor area ratio for single use residential would only, that restriction would only be within the South and New Tampa planning districts. And I know Randy and Stephen are with us tonight from the city, and they're going to have another presentation after this brief intro to kind of go into the thinking behind why the city is proposing this language in the way they are. So here we have right now, and I know it's very difficult to see, but this is the UMU 60 category with the proposed changes. So knew it was going to be hard to see. So here we can see where they're deleting whichever calculation is more beneficial to the development. This is under the, again, this is under the UMU 60. And they're basically allowing for this new language, which would change some language in regards to a project being consistent versus compatible with the development character around it. And then here's the main part of the change. It stated single-use multifamily residential projects within the South Tampa Planning District or the new Tampa Planning District shall not use FAR to determine a site's density potential. So that's how it is in the UMU 60. And then if we go on to the CC 35 and CMU 35, you can see that the language is almost exact from what is being proposed in UMU 60. It's just remember that the UMU 60 has a higher FAR than the community commercial and community mixed use 35. That maximum FAR is a 2 in these categories, which is a 3.25 under UMU 60. So the language would be the same. That's what they're proposing to remove and add. And then where is the new Tampa and South Tampa planning districts? These are the maps from the vision map. The planning districts are set out, the description, the legal descriptions are within the land development code. And these are visual representations of that legal description. So basically in South Tampa, it basically runs south of Kennedy, and then it jogs down, that's Himes, then goes over to Swan and then down to Howard. So everything south of this blue line here is within the South Tampa Planning District. Then New Tampa is basically everything above the University of South Florida.
Is that Fletcher?
That's actually north of that preserve that everyone's been talking about. The nature preserve up at USF, it's north of that. This is the preserve, and then it's north of this line here. But this is Bruce B. Downs. So it's everything, Fletcher is down here, the south. So it's north of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Then here we have the parcels that are currently designated as urban mixed use 60, the community mixed use 35, and the community commercial 35. You can see there predominantly there's some over near Rattlesnake Point, and then you've got there's some, most of them are along the corridors, Gandy, Dale Mabry, McDill has some, and then you've got near the intersection of Dale Mabry and Henderson, there's a large swath, but there are other areas in this segment that have community mixed use. And that's the current designation as adopted. Now, again, this won't apply in most of this area. This is the Central, West Shore, and University districts. So you would still be able to use FAR if the applicant chooses to, for residential development, predominantly within this section. And then New Tampa, the community commercial 35 is really only found near the intersection of I-75 and Bruce B. Downs, which I believe is predominantly built out with commercial, suburban commercial uses. That's it for my part of the presentation. I think either Stephen or Randy have a presentation as well. I'm trying to monitor the chat to see if you all have any questions. Do we do you all have any questions regarding just this presentation before we move on to the next one? Anybody?
No.
All right. Okay, well, I see Carol Ann. You have a question?
Quick question. What's the difference between consistent and compatible? I see you changed it from one to the other.
That might be covered in Stephen's presentation.
I'll cover
There
that,
are- Yeah, there are different definitions, so I think Stephen will cover that. Any others? All right, Stephen, if you're ready, let
I
me
just
unshare
need
my-
to be able to share. It says,
Let me figure that out here. Hold on. Look at my. My menu went away. Hold on one second. Here we go. There we go. Sorry about that.
I need a permission to share, David or Carol.
Okay,
Caroline.
let's go. Uh, all right. I think that worked. Do you have the ability to share?
It says I'm sharing. Are y'all able to see it?
There we go.
Okay, great. So Stephen Benson with the City of Tampa City Planning Department. And we just have a few slides that go over what David just presented, as well as provide a little bit more detail and some summary information to explain what we're proposing. So just the 5 points I'm going to go over are the proposed revision. I introduced the planning district concept, which is adopted already in the comprehensive plan and in the land development code. Go over the geographic limitation for the amendment. Look at some of the areas and highlight the affected parcels, and then just make note of some of the prior feedback that we received that we believe is being addressed as part of this revision to the amendment. So on the screen, not going to read it word for word, but this is the evolution of how the proposed language for the amendment has changed. You can see the existing language on the left, which David presented. The language that was in City Council's original resolution is in the middle, and the language revised as of today is on the far right, and that is the language that David presented in his slide. When I finish my presentation, we'll be happy to go over any specific questions about any of this text. So this slide is an image of the vision map that is currently in the comprehensive plan on page 10. The planning districts, which you see here outlined in the different colors, we've highlighted them all and called them out in the different colored boxes. The actual boundaries for those planning districts are in the land development code, section 2720, but I will go over the specific locations of those boundaries so that you understand fully where they begin and where they end. And the reason why we are proposing to associate this amendment with planning districts is because of the language in the comprehensive plan and how the vision section lays out distinct different visions for each of the planning districts. And here on the screen is the section that relates to New Tampa and South Tampa, which are envisioned as being areas of stability with growth being directed and being encouraged in the other planning districts rather than the New Tampa and the South Tampa planning districts generally. And as I said, the major opportunities here for these two districts, according to the plan, are maintaining neighborhood stability, fostering compatible infill to improve mobility and sustainability, as well as specifically in New Tampa, achieving a more sustainable mix of development. So in terms of looking at the actual planning district boundaries, as David mentioned, the South Tampa Planning District covers most of the Inner Bay Peninsula, most of South Tampa. The areas that it does not include, which are part of the Central Tampa Planning District, are the areas south of Swan, east of Howard, south of Swan, east of Howard, as well as the areas north of Swan and east of Himes. Those are part of Central Tampa Planning District. And then the areas north of Kennedy are part of the West Shore Planning District. So the South Tampa Planning District is essentially everything outside of those areas to the south. And as David mentioned, the legal description for the South Tampa Planning District is in the Land Development Code, section 2720. For the New Tampa Planning District, I tried to kind of call out here some landmarks to give you a better sense of that. The New Tampa Planning District is generally all of the New Tampa areas that are incorporated in part of the city of Tampa. Where it does not include is the area around the Claw Golf Course that's part of USF, as well as the preserved lands to the east of the Claw, just north of Fletcher. That is part of the University Planning District. It does not include Lettuce Lake Park, which is part of unincorporated Hillsborough County, but it does include the Hidden River development area, which is just west of I-75 and north of Fletcher. So everything in the pink boundary is the New Tampa Planning District. And then this is just the future land use map that David presented. I'm not going to go into this one, but we will focus in specifically on the parcels within the South Tampa Planning District, which are what is displayed here on the screen. And I'm going to leave it here for just a few seconds to allow you to make note of these areas here. And this is the same image for the New Tampa Planning District. We don't show the other two future land use categories on this map because they are not present in the New Tampa Planning District. Only the CC35 is present in New Tampa. So comparing the visions for the different planning districts to some of the growth trends, this chart is showing residential unit growth since 2010. Not to be confused with population growth. This growth is specifically number of residential units by planning district. You can see up through 2010 is denoted in the gray bar, and then the 5-year increment from 2010 to 2015 is in blue, and the 5-year increase from 2015 to 2020 is in red. So going through each one, the West Shore District, the rate of growth is increasing. We know that because the growth that occurred from 2010 to 2015, that blue area is smaller than the red area. So more units were added within the last 5 years than the 5 years prior. That rate of growth is right around the citywide average at 12.8%. The citywide average is 12.77% residential unit growth across the entire city. In New Tampa, it's a slightly different picture. There was significant growth between 2010 and 2015, and that growth has started to taper off from 2015 to 2020. However, the average growth in New Tampa in residential units is higher than the citywide average. That is not in line with what the vision for New Tampa laid out. However, most of that growth is the result of several large subdivisions actually finishing construction and filling up. So we anticipate that decrease in the growth trend to continue, and that population, that residential unit count to actually level off and become more stable. In the university area, there was a 1% average increase in housing units, and that is obviously lower than the citywide average of 12.77% and lower than what was envisioned for the university area in the comp plan vision. For the South Tampa Planning District, the average increase in this district was 14.31%. That is higher than the citywide average, which is not in line with what the comprehensive plan's vision for South Tampa indicated. And then we see here, comparing the blue and the red, that the population, or the residential unit increases that occurred from 2010 to 2015 was less, almost half actually, the growth in residential units from 2015 to 2020. So we can, observing this, we can say that the rate in residential unit growth in South Tampa is actually increasing because it is higher in the last 5 years than it was in the 5 years prior. Again, that average is 14.31%, which is higher than the citywide average. Then looking at the Central Tampa district, which is the largest district. This one looks also very similar to South Tampa proportionately. The growth from 2010 to 2015 was about half what the residential unit growth was from 2015 to 2020. And that average growth rate is 14.16%, which is higher than the citywide average. Again, the difference here being that in South Tampa, the comprehensive plan laid out a very different vision than the vision for the Central Tampa district in the comprehensive plan. And so this is really the crux of why we're introducing this geographic limitation, specifically when it comes to the South Tampa planning district.
Stephen, this is David Hay. I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you like to complete your presentation before any questions, or do you want to take them as they come?
That's up to you. You're the host, so it's up to you. What would you prefer?
Let's try to do it. I say if the question is dealing with this slide, let's see. I think Jean has her hand up. Jean, did you have a question specific on this slide, like the data, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why don't we try to get the question answered while it's up?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, because otherwise I'll forget. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I'm not really taking notes. Okay, my question about that slide, you're looking at the South Tampa and it says, the addition of 14.31%, 4,702 units. We have for 2 years been ringing the bells on and the alarms on this, but those 4,702 units, I would like to see that broken down south of Gandy, because I guarantee you probably 90% of those units are south of Gandy, which makes that increase actually a lot larger. You would probably double that is in the percentage if you just put that section just south of Gandy, which again is area stability. That's it. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Hello?
does. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen.
If you can answer the question though. I mean, just answer if
Oh,
you have.
I don't have the information readily available, but I understand the point that you're making.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're good, Stephen. You want to keep going?
Okay. Sure.
I don't see. Jean, can you put your hand down? Just I'm trying to track.
This is a summary just of some of the major points from that we received during the public hearings, the prior stakeholder meeting, and then just input from members of the public and other stakeholders. And that is the FAR option has been used by projects to generate significant increases in density in both quote unquote low growth and high growth planning areas. The 10-year housing growth in South Tampa, in the South Tampa planning district specifically, exceeded the citywide average and was the second highest growth district in the city when it comes to residential units. The FAR option is being used for single-use projects within mixed-use future land use categories. Housing affordability is another concern in terms of limiting housing densities in new projects and how that might impact the housing affordability issues that we're currently seeing. This question of how to define compatibility versus how to define consistency, and the rationale for why we made the recommendation to swap out those two terms, which I'll explain in the next slide. And then the sixth item, which is continuing to promote mixed use projects along the designated mixed use corridors, which are largely within the planning districts that we are not making part of this amendment. So the Central, West Shore, and University areas, University planning districts, those three districts do carry the vast majority of the mixed use corridors in the city, with the exception of a couple of corridors in South Tampa planning district. So this consistency versus compatibility, it's really a simple explanation that the reason why we're recommending to use the term compatible rather than consistent is because compatible is actually defined in the comprehensive plan and the land development code. whereas consistent, the term consistent is not, and there is not criteria in either document to make that determination within this context. So we're proposing to use the word consistent because, or compatible, because that is what's defined in the comprehensive plan already. And the definition is here on the screen. I'm happy to read it. Compatibility is defined as the characteristics of different uses or activities or design which allow them to be located near or adjacent to each other in harmony. Some elements affecting compatibility include the following: height, scale, mass, and bulk of structures, pedestrian or vehicular traffic circulation, access, and parking impacts, landscaping, lighting, noise, odor, and architecture. Compatibility does not mean the same as. Rather, it refers to the sensitivity of development proposals in maintaining the character of existing development. And so that's the definition that we are going with. And that's what it means when we're swapping out those terms. So this is really almost the last slide, but this summarizes, from a big picture standpoint, what we're proposing to do. No changes to the 3 planning districts that are here in green. The gray buffers are again, those mixed use corridors, and we're covering the vast majority of them, continuing to promote mixed use within the 3 planning districts in green. And then in the South Tampa Planning District and in the New Tampa Planning District are where we are proposing the actual change for the FAR option. I see a hand up, so I'm going to pause, David, if you'd like to take it.
Okay, Cammie, you have a question?
Let me first unmute myself and start talking without it. Yeah, thank you. Stephen, I had a question about kind of what you were saying when you're talking about the vision plan for the plans, and that the growth was maybe perhaps inconsistent with the vision plan, but the plan categories really are what control the appropriate density and intensity. I don't know that the vision, the statement of the vision of what would be superior to that which is the controlling language of the plan amendment. Because I mean, if we have if we're growing fast, but we have designations that allow up to 30 units the acre, you're going to see growth.
Sure.
With redevelopment, right? I mean, so
I guess
just kind of want to get a little more clarification on that, if you could. Thanks.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that the point that we're trying to make is that the FAR option does allow for more, but how much more? And that's really, that question is really the crux of this issue, is that projects are coming in with significantly higher densities than even what the future land use category would allow, based upon the conventional measure of residential density, which is dwelling units per acre. The FAR option is being utilized, and some projects are getting 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% higher than the conventional measure. And that is really the crux of this, this point.
Understood. And if you are going to end up doing a breakout of south of Gandy, could you also do a breakout of what the densities were of those projects that were approved, to see whether or not they were utilizing FAR or they were using residential density? I think that would be helpful.
Sure. I see 3 more hands up, or 2 more hands up. David, did you want to take these now, or would you like to?
Well, did you, I saw that you changed the slide, Stephen, to this one that deals, I think this goes to Cammie's. Does this help with Cammie's question, this slide? Or?
Yeah, this shows 13, there were 13 projects that were approved between 2015 and 2020 that met this criteria as being a multifamily residential project that utilized the FAR option to determine the density potential. And these 13 were the projects that came in above the number of units that would have been allowed if conventional density was used as the maximum. So you can see here in orange is the max number of units based upon the conventional density, so without the FAR option. These projects would have been capped, so to speak, at the numbers that you see here in orange. And in yellow is the increase, is the additional amount of density, amount of units that these projects were able to achieve through using the FAR option. So you can see here that the actual amounts, it's not a consistent amount. It's not like they're all getting 10%, they're all getting 20%. It actually is very unpredictable in terms of the amount over. And this is what we believe, is what is not in line with that concept of stability and predictability, is that it's very difficult to predict the actual amount over. So I hope this sort of helps to answer your question, Cami. But if it doesn't, feel free to.
No,
to
it
speak
does.
up
Thank
again.
you.
You're welcome. I see 2 other hands up also.
Yeah, Stephen, I just, I noticed this slide does not have the zoning numbers on it. I
I think that just got deleted, but we'll go back and add that back in.
that
Yeah.
might help Cami in her question.
Sure, definitely.
Stephanie, I think you're next. Hopefully you were able to see some of the slides. If I'm reading the chat, you were having some problems, but can you hear us? Or you're muted.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Uh,
You're good.
To answer Cammie's question, the last project since we came on the scene at the Stopover Building SOG, none of them have used FAR by the time we got finished with Fludra. So that answers that question. What they did before we were around, I'm not 100% certain. But I'd also like to see it drug out for the numbers of single family homes versus the multifamily units that we've been inundated with. What I've pulled from the Hillsborough County tax records is we have grown by, at least in the west of Dale Mabry, we've grown by less than 100 new single family homes in the last 4 or 5 years, or since 2016. And but we've managed to drag in 4,200 new nifty apartments. So that, yes, FAR is part of the problem, but it's not the only problem. But when you're talking about, we have just, you can count on your fingers how many grows. Of course, we have one large development that's in the process, and it'll add about 175 houses down here. But I honestly, when we look at the big picture, just like Jean pointed out, it's south of Gandy. I remember going to a meeting and said, it's a 10-acre lot, and went to a South Tampa coalition meeting, and I said it was a 10-acre lot, and everybody's jaws dropped open because they were like, where in the world is there 10 acres in South Tampa? Because we had to take the brunt of that, because it's just simply because of the inability to find that lots that size north of Gandy.
Well, Stephanie, this is David. Just to kind of follow up with your question, I think, I think it would be very difficult for the city at this stage of its lifespan. Basically, we've really kind of grown past just providing single family detached. And I think there'll always be some opportunity for single family detached infill in certain areas, but the predominant where these multifamilies are going, they were either old industrial sites that had land uses far exceeding a single family use, which this. And so a lot of times that, the growth is going to be in the multifamily, because the sites are not, they have a leftover entitlements from when they were industrial or some sort of other commercial use, and that they're converting into these residential. So that's one just comment I wanted to.
I don't disagree with that, but I do disagree with the fact that we are straight up, multi-use or multifamily with no kind of mixed use. We basically, they're stealing all the places where we could have retail or commercial or any of. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I just wanted to point that out because it's not in these numbers. So, and that was also my second question. Where does it, I mean, that's really my question is, where is it all broke down? When you start looking at that, you've got a predominantly single family neighborhood for 50, 60 years. And now we're putting in apartments, but we don't have any infrastructure for them. So.
Duly noted, duly noted. Was that it, Stephanie?
Yes, sir. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. David, I see your hand up, but I think Eric was in front of you. He's in chat and I'll read it out. It says, how do you envision, I guess Randy, Stephen, myself could probably, how do you envision the proposed changes to South Tampa and New Tampa will alter residential unit growth in these areas going into the next 5 or 10 years? Stephen, did you want to just give your opinion on that or?
Well, I don't know that we can actually, say with 100% certainty, but what we can say is that this will limit the number of units above the conventional density that would be going in with each project. And the reason why I'm saying limit is because there are provisions that exist that allow projects to come in higher, such as through the bonus provision program in the code, as well as I believe some other incentives. However, the difference between those mechanisms and the FAR option is that those mechanisms are actually capped at a finite amount. So we know how much more those are going to be. Whereas as you can see by the screen, the size of the yellow bars on all of the projects are all different, especially in relation to the orange, which is what was allowable. Some of them doubled, some of them only increased by a small portion. And so it's not necessarily the amount, although that is of interest too. It's the fact that it's different for each one that is creating this issue of instability that we're trying to shed light on.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Stephanie, just a quick reminder, if could you put your hand down if you're done? I'm just trying to make sure everybody is heard, but I think Dave Mechanic is next. David?
Yes, could you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
I'd just like to offer a few comments here. The premise of this amendment, I think, sort of got started with the idea that all these increased densities were an unintended consequence. And I don't really believe that, because whoever wrote that language certainly could have done the math very easily and would see that the density potentially could be much greater. In fact, David, when you discuss the rationale for that language being included in 1998, you said it was to make multifamily development more competitive with commercial, and that has been true over the years. Commercial property was commanded a higher per square foot value than residential. But in my mind, that all was intentional. And the reason I think it was intentional is that there is a desire to provide more affordable housing in the community. And I'm not saying affordable in the sense of the legal definition. I'm talking about the fact that apartments are more affordable than most single family homes, especially since the crash, when a person trying to buy a home probably has to put down a 25% down payment, which ultimately excludes a whole bunch of people from the marketplace of single family home ownership. So I would just point out that all of this was thought through at some point in the past, and I'm not sure you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. We are, every conversation at city council deals with, we need to provide for more affordable housing. And while again, I'm not talking necessarily about legal affordable housing, I'm talking about the fact that people need housing that is more affordable than is generally available in the community. So I would just like everyone on the staff to be considering these issues when they proceed with this thing. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'm just going to make a statement that language about the more competitive is out of the 98 plan. It's the Planning Commission staff's opinion that it was an intentional decision to make it more competitive, and times do change, and it may be appropriate to reevaluate that policy, but it was not an unintended consequence. It was a deliberate, it was a deliberate attempt to try to make housing more affordable along the corridors, especially affordable in the sense that our corridors in the 90s were almost solely commercial. And, we have started now seeing where some of our corridors now have a better mixture than they did in the 90s. But again, it may be time to rethink if that policy still works the way it's worded. So that's where the Planning Commission, at least right now, finding on that language from 98 is. So hope that clarifies anything.
Hey, David,
right.
I can add one thing, and that is I don't think it was intended to be used the way it is today. I wrote the response to the York report for Rattlesnake Point in 2006. And in defending the city council's action at that time, I used the maximum number of residential units I used, and that report is available if anybody wants it, was all based on the base FAR. We didn't even think about using the FAR. Excuse me, it was based on the base density of requirements of 35 dwelling units an acre. So when we justified the change in land use to, at the time, DCA, we're using it on the base plan categories. We didn't even think about using an FAR number to generate more units than what the plan categories would allow. So I would dispute that back in 98, even in the early 2005, that we thought that it would be used to that the category would be used to the extent that it has, and allow in some projects residential units far and above the base category. So times have changed. It's being used quite a bit now, and it's created some controversy. So it's always good to go back and look at the plan and make changes to address issues and move things forward. But I don't think David Mechanic, I don't think that was really the case back in 98. I think we looked at it as an opportunity to try to encourage residential development, but obviously not at a number that we're seeing today in some of the projects.
So you could say that ability to use it, the city now may think that it may have worked too well, because from what your comment is. So and change in policy, I think, is always good to look and reevaluate policies. So this may be the time to do that. I think Nicole is next. Nicole?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. You?
Good. I have a couple of questions. Cynthia Spidell from my firm, Stearns Weaver, sent a report to, I believe, the Planning Commission back in May, and she was wondering if there was any plan to respond to her opinion letter on this, or if you're planning to provide, specific comments in response to people who reach out through these kind of memos or letters.
All letters received are put into the Planning Commission folder for review by the Planning commissioners and eventually Tampa City Council. Typically, Planning Commission staff, since we are directed only to look at adopted policy and coming to our consistency finding, we don't usually reference letters or opinion letters, but they're all available for the commissioners to take, and they can look at it and make a decision based on that, but staff's kind of directed only to look at the policies themselves.
Okay. And I'm not sure which group would be the best person to ask for this, but House Bill 59, is that going to affect the timeline for transmitting this? Or do you have an update on like the status of the city's property rights element?
We are currently working on, I believe that's TACPA 2121. If everything, knock on wood and keep your fingers crossed, if everything works the way it should, we think we will have that amendment first that night, and then the other amendments can follow it, including this one. So if everything works as planned, it should still be scheduled for September 30th.
Okay, awesome. And then, sorry, one more question. I've been writing them down as we've been going. The graphic that you have shown on the screen, I just want to confirm. So these are all of the units that have been approved over what the density is in that future land use category. Was there a bonus involved in these projects that they then were given a higher density than what was allowed in that underlying future land use?
This is Stephen Mitson. No, there is not, because the FAR option is a by right option and bonus is not. So bonus requires an agreement the council has to approve. So these are showing the orange is based upon the base densities for those categories.
Thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Sean, I know you're next, but let me try to get through some of the comments just in the chat, and then I'll come back to you, Sean. Okay. Stephanie talks about there's nothing really affordable in South Tampa. And then Jean has a comment: affordable housing in a single family residential neighborhood means houses that are not McMansions. We're talking about reasonable price houses. That's the American dream. And they're thanking Randy, and they're giving thumbs up to Randy. So kudos to Randy. And then on to Sean.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Stephen, can you go back to the slide before you jump to this one? It had the map of South Tampa and showed the corridors. Yes, that one. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Couple of comments, thoughts, questions all the way around. So what are the options? So on the corridors in South Tampa, the one's Del Mabry and one is Gandy. That's what I'm guessing that Nick highlighted, but I want to focus in on Gandy. So on Gandy, someone comes in, says, okay, we're going to do a mixed use project. Can they still use FAR? Is that correct?
Yes, they can still use the FAR option.
Okay.
To determine their density.
Okay, now here's where I have a concern with that. Now you show a lot of where, there's a lot of potential for growth. Now Gandy is classified as a transit corridor in the comp plan. However, it's very hard to consider Gandy a transit corridor when Hart doesn't even have a bus line going down Gandy at all. Now the other aspect is the definition of mixed use. That is something that really hasn't been defined as far as percentage wise of what a project's supposed to have. And so I have concern in that, we've got some large parcels on Gandy that could potentially are going to be developed, but without a clear definition of mixed use, someone could say, oh, I want to use the FAR, but let's put, 4,000 apartments with 2,000 commercial. 2,000 square feet of commercial, we'll call that mixed use, because there's nothing really defining percentage. So I have a very large concern with that, that really doing this, excluding the transit corridor, non-transit corridor, because Gandy really isn't a transit corridor right now. If Hart doesn't have a bus line going down to it, and we've only got one line that goes south of Euclid, that's it. It's very difficult to even conceive that that makes any sense to leave FAR as an option for any of these developers, especially with no definition of mixed use and Gandy not being a true transit corridor at all right now. And I haven't heard of anything becoming, at least adding a line or something anytime soon. So those are some comments, questions, and concerns I have all the way around when it comes to that. Also, in response to David Mechanic's comments, look, just recently on July 19th, an article came out, the CoStar, a new study from CoStar Group came out and said rents in Tampa Bay are increasing faster than any place in the entire country by 15.6% since January. The average in the country is 7%. We're over double, an increased rent since January. So to say that more, the intention of apartments or multifamily residential, all that stuff was to create affordable housing is BS. And clearly the statistics are now showing that. In addition, more studies have come out just recently, like from the National Low Income Housing Coalition that said, the fair market, for a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida is $1,290. In studies, 2-bedroom apartments going for $1,700 plus. And they said someone to even afford a $1,290 apartment would have to make $51,619 a year. So, to be quite blunt, I mean, no one, is making, the average is not 60, 65 grand a year in people's salary, unfortunately. So there's a big problem when it comes to thinking that these apartment complexes are actually providing any level of affordable housing at all, because clearly they're not. And studies are now coming out and showing that our area is in royal deep trouble in regards to this. So anyway, these are my comments, questions, and concerns, and hopefully can have some more discussion on them and things like that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sean. Any other questions anyone has?
Can I ask one?
Sure.
Okay, on some of the chat comments, my name's David and I live in South Tampa.
Yeah.
I think they hit it right on the head with some of these McMansions. I mean, I live in a part of the area, most of these houses were built around 1950 and they were single level houses and probably built for the returning GIs from World War II. Yet, I'm not given any voice into somebody coming in, tearing one of them down and putting up a McMansion that's 2 stories high. It's totally out of character with everything else that's around here. And it's going to send everything through the roof. How can you not give us a voice in what's happening, yet we complain about affordability, people can't afford it? Well, the evidence is right down the street from me.
Any feedback, Stephen, that's, I hear your concern. That's really not what this amendment deals with. I will know, and if Stephen or Randy want to chime in, a lot of the single family detached zoning districts, and I'm not a zoning expert, but a lot of the zoning that exists in the city that's single family detached allows a height of 35 feet by right. So anyone, even the owner of the existing house, could just say, you know what, I want to tear down and rebuild where I live and build something that is larger than what they had previously. They would still have to meet setbacks and everything, but that's a discussion that maybe can be looked at during the future comp plan update. But that doesn't really, this amendment doesn't really deal with your concern on that issue.
Yeah, David, I can add, I mean, and again, you're right. This amendment is dealing with only one piece of the larger growth management challenge that we have in front of us. And tonight, we're constrained to address the plan amendment that City Council moved forward. But some of the comments that were just raised, we've been listening to the public for the last 6 months through the Moves project of going out and getting public feedback. We also have a number of emails from neighborhoods and also from other interest stakeholders. We've done 2 neighborhood commercial district plans where we've met with residents and business owners and stakeholders on a much more intimate setting to really hear their concerns. And really, there's a lot of different opportunities and concerns that are being expressed by the public on the future of Tampa. And that's one of the sort of the backdrop of where we plan to go with the plan update and trying to address a lot of those issues. I keep telling my staff that the city's targeted to receive about 150,000 new people and about 150,000 new employees over the next 20 years. And the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, where are they going to live, where are they going to work, and where are they going to plan to enjoy the community? At the same time, there's a lot of impacts in every neighborhood where they do locate. So we have to figure out how can they move to Tampa and work in Tampa and create quality neighborhoods at the same time. So all those questions are going to come back once we get into the plan update, which will start. Actually, we've started in terms of the staff looking at the issues, but we'll start really looking at these further over the next several months. And it's going to require a lot of discussion like this, but hopefully we'll make some progress on it.
Thanks, Randy. I see Sean, you still have your hand up. Do you have another comment or?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on, with Randy. I think Randy is spot on. Randy's, and everyone's doing a great job. And again, I think we need to take to heart now that studies are being done and, the area is starting to be flagged. I mean, it's astonishing that rent has increased by nearly 16% since January compared to the rest of the country. I think, that goes to what Randy's saying, how are people looking at, going to be able to afford something, and where are they located when it comes to working, and what's the average salary of the area, and how affordable really is anything if rent is going up at such a, astronomical pace. And the question is, how much time do we truly have before, things really become dire. And again, we have to look at the transit situation too. And this goes back to my point with Gandy not having any transit. People are going to need cars to get to work, and gas prices are going up. And we see now the average is what, $2.99. We're soon going to be over $3. And so, people are going to be pinching pennies even further. So, I mean, there's a lot to truly, really digest and look at here. And there's going to be some serious changes that need to be made, and tough changes that both sides, even developers are going to have to suck up and understand that greed is going to, have to take a back burner. Maybe if they only make a 10 million versus 100 million, well, still making a profit is better than nothing. So anyway, that's just kind of piggyback off of Randy. And again, thank you, everyone. A lot of hard work. So appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Next, Nicole, do you have your hand up again? Did you have another question?
Yes. I just wanted to know which groups you guys have met with as part of drafting this plan update, like what community organizations you've been working with, and if any of those organizations have a specific vision or a need for affordable housing.
Well, I can't speak for the city staff, but I think, we've only met with city staff. That's how early it is in the process. We're not really in a, it's just coordinating, what are we going to look into at the Planning Commission versus what does the city staff going to look into? What do they want the Planning Commission staff to help them with? Things like that. I don't know if Randy wants to provide a little more detail or.
Well, I mean, I'm not
everything.
I'll just give a general response. I mean, we've in the spring we had 10 community meetings through the Moves project. where
right.
the community was invited to participate and provide their input. I said we met with dozens with people in the Palmacian community plan, the Main Street community plan. We've got emails from business owners and residents throughout the city asking about questions when this plan amendment was coming up all through the moratorium. We met with representatives from NAAP, the West Shore Alliance, the downtown partnership, some of the other residential organizations in addition to South of Gandy. So we met with a wide spectrum of people in the community related to growth and their input on the vision for the city. Whether or not they have a specific interest in affordable housing, we didn't get into those discussions, at least from my perspective. So I can't answer that question.
All right, Nicole, you all set?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And before I forget, we are recording this. We are going to have someone tomorrow, one of our administrative assistants, go through and get some notes out of this all. And of course, we'll try to keep our website as up to date as possible. So hopefully you'll all see. There are some comments in the chat box. Sean has a comment dealing with, to summarize, he believes he wants to see the FAR completely eliminated for anything in South Tampa, especially since much of Gandy is fair game and left in. I think his comments kind of also discuss that. Dave Mechanic comments about that, you know, when he's discussing affordability, it's not the affordable legal description, that it's more affordable to rent. This is his comment. It's more affordable to rent than a single family home in that area. And then Cami has a comment, restricting the supply of housing will make the prices rise even more, particularly in this current environment of unprecedented demand. Sean then goes into other comments about the rent between $1,700 and $2,200 for a 2-bedroom is ridiculous, he says. Earnings and rent is not aligned and folks are being put in poverty. Well, there's lots of chat. We can talk about this if I don't want to just sit here and read the chat, but so we've seen that there's a bunch of different opinions on this. Were there any closing questions or statements or anything? Carol, you want me to read yours, Carol? These multifamily are not cheaper than houses. Article in paper says West Shore Marina 2-bedroom starts at $2,800. Townhomes are, I assume that's $500,000. So we are hearing there's affordability, dealing with the housing stock, and then we're also dealing with this. If we restrict demand, does that actually cause rents to go up? So there's lots of kind of discussion, I think, that will continue far beyond this meeting. But any other, Stephen, did you have anything you wanted to state or anything?
Just the summary wrap-up slide that I think, you know, speaks probably to several comments that have been made. I'm hearing comments on multiple different fronts, but just 3 points I want to make and make sure everyone understands that the ability to use the FAR option to determine maximum density potential for single use multifamily projects will no longer be allowed on parcels that meet both of these 2 criteria. And the first is one of those 3 categories. These are the categories that are generally falling within those corridors that you saw on the map. And then the second criteria that has to meet is that they have to fall within the South Tampa and New Tampa planning districts. And then these 2 final points, I believe, speak maybe to some of the questions or comments. And that is that no parcels within the Central Tampa Planning District, West Shore Planning District, and University Planning District will be affected by this amendment. And it's important to note that that constitutes the majority of both the existing residential units and also all of the CRAs, all of the urban villages, and all of the major employment business centers as well. So that will remain as the status quo. And then the final point is that no mixed use projects anywhere in the city will be affected by this amendment, as this only affects single use residential multifamily. And that's all I had.
All right, before we conclude, well, we've already done our Q&A if anyone has any more, but I just want to go over the dates again. August 24th is the briefing with the Planning Commission. Again, just remember, the briefing is really for the commissioners. There's typically no public comment at that meeting. It's just staff kind of introducing it to the commissioners. The commissioners can ask staff any questions, but typically, opponents, proponents, it doesn't get into that big discussion there. It's just a quick briefing. The big discussion, I'm assuming, will take place on September 14th at the Planning Commission. That's the actual Planning Commission hearing where staff will be there with our consistency finding, whether staff recommending to the Planning Commissioners, whether it's consistent or inconsistent with the adopted policies of the plan. Now, mostly everyone's familiar with how the Planning Commission works, but the planning commissioners, which are appointed by the 4 jurisdictions, they can agree or disagree with staff. So whatever they decide, their decision becomes the official recommendation of the Planning Commission. And then that official recommendation is sent on to the Tampa City Council, where we'll have another, I assume, lively discussion at City Council. We'll be there presenting the official recommendation. City staff will have their recommendation. I think we know where they're coming from. And then City Council can hear from all the stakeholders again and can, ask staff questions while the applicant is city staff, or can, and hear from the public on a wide range of issues related to this amendment. So again, that's September 30th. If there is any change due to the ever-evolving private property rights, we will let everyone know, of course, as soon as possible, but we have a path forward for September 30th if everything stays aligned. So, and then that adoption date still is to be determined, but that probably would be in October or November. So that, I think, concludes my comments. Any final? Again, this recording will be available. We'll get it up to the website as soon as possible. All comments, written comments that we received are being put in, and you can read them on the website. We're getting them up there. There might be a few days it takes us to get them up there, but we try to get them up on the website as soon as possible. But as this process moves forward, always feel free to contact me or Jennifer at the Planning Commission, or we will try to get you an answer on what our role is and what we can answer based on the comp plan. So I hope everyone found this helpful, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Stephen. Randy, good
Thanks,
job.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.